Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Not sure when you're listening to this. I hope the extra day helped and wanted to share a little overview of MTSS. And this is one of several different elements I'm sharing with you. Colleen Riley is going to share with you a perspective, and another teacher is going to share with you a perspective. And so, what I wanted to do is kind of give an overview. Now, why are we talking about first of all? Well, first of all, response to intervention and multi-tiered systems of support are out there in our schools today. Now, there's primary components. There's screening, progress monitoring, multi-level prevention, and database decision making. These are the key elements. I know this is a bad visual, folks, but you may have heard of RTI, you may have heard of MTSS, and the skinny of it is, and if you've ever seen these comics in the past, and yes, this is very, your eyes are not all out of focus, it's out of focus. But I remember when I was a kid looking at the Sunday comics and trying to see the differences. And in this instance, there's probably no differences or very, very subtle differences between the two. So our purposes, though, MTSS includes everything from RTI to school and community collaboration to what's called positive behavioral intervention supports or PBIS to universal design for learning. It is a huge umbrella in our schools today. It was adopted nearly 10 or so years ago in our schools in the state of Kansas. It's been a national emphasis for the better part of 10 to 20 years. And depending upon your district, it'll have different elements and different influences. My purpose is to share with you the basic overview because it is a framework in which we dictate our instruction, dictate our assessment, and dictate what we do both behaviorally but also in the area of social emotional. Now, it is not a special ed framework. This is a general ed framework. And this is something that the state of Kansas is a perfect example of it. The MTSS efforts are district-wide and for general ed, benefiting all students, including those with disabilities. I can't emphasize that enough. If you haven't heard about it in your general ed classes, I guess tisk, shame on them, because it is an effort that many districts across the state have incorporated or are incorporating for all learners. Now, with that said, the primary elements of MTSS, as I mentioned a moment ago, is basically allowing you to make a decision as a teacher, as an educator, based on data. Now, you may say, well, Sean, yeah, I have formal assessments, informal assessments all the time. Well, that's an element of data. We're going to kind of go a little bit more direct with data, especially for us elementary school teachers, but also for our middle secondary teachers as well. Now, there is an element of screening. Now, some folks may know the MAP testing or other tests like that. And those tests will help with just generally understanding where the learner is when it comes to math, social emotional, reading, writing, things of that nature, that we then better understand what we need to do for our learners. Now, there's a bunch of tools out there today. You elementary school teachers may have heard about the Ames Web. You may have heard about Dibbles. You may have heard about other elements there. Those are very specific to math and reading. Others of you are like, I haven't heard about those things yet. Well, there will be assessments used in your building or your district for collecting data on students. Why? Because we are a data-driven society. Our local districts expect it. Our communities are voting for the bond issues and for the budgets and for the school board and for the teachers. They want data. So we are in a data-driven decision-making environment in the 21st century. It's just what's the data and what can we do with it? So MTSS is focused particularly on the idea that we want to make sure that the student is moving along at the level that is expected of us as instructors, but also individual to the individual. So that's individual to the individual, that's specific to the individual. Meaning if they are not moving along at the performance rate that they need to, what can we do to adjust that? And what can we do in terms of interventions to support the individual? Now, let me give you an example. This might be in a math class where we're just simply looking to see what are students doing when it comes to subtract positive and negative integers. So it might be an activity we have, and it might be a data point that's part of an academic curriculum we have. So this is automatically part of our academic curriculum. It's just a data point that they access. More and more of our one-to-one environments or where we have digital devices, this is automatic where they can complete an activity and bingo, we have the data in front of us. But take a look, folks. It looks like probably Shirley in that light blue. Maybe it's Joanne as well. I'm not sure. They clearly are not moving at the level they need to. Look at that. It's almost flat line. Now, our purple individual looks like Doug. Doug is just like sailing. And it looks like Charles. Charles is all of a sudden picked up in terms of the data. Look at that data point from 4 to 5, really moving in terms of number correct in 2 minutes. So these are an example of progress monitoring. And we can kind of move through here in respect to, so where are the individuals initially? And clearly Doug is an outlier. And then we kind of go taking a look at stage 2 in respect to, okay, so where are our learners? And then stage 3, and by here, we're actually probably identifying maybe Tanisha and Shirley in terms of the individuals that we might need to adjust some of our interventions for as we go forward. Now, another way of looking at this, I guess it's Kia and class average as well. So Kia and class average, when we look at the data, my goodness, the class average is way up into the 70s, but Kia is struggling at 40. So this would be using data to make a decision about interventions that are necessary. Now, oftentimes, I can't emphasize this enough, oftentimes in math and reading, this data at the elementary and middle school level is available to us via a number of curriculums we're using, oftentimes digital curriculums, meaning they're automatically online and we can have the students complete something and then quickly we go into the administrative function and we have access to this data. So the lift isn't getting the data, the lift is looking at the data and making a decision, what are we going to do for Kia? So in this instance, the targeted intervention that we offered to everybody, was between the 4th and 5th. And what we found out for Kia, it did have an effect. It's raising her level, clearly not the level we'd like to, but in terms of class average, well, it looks like, they're stuck at between 70 and 80. We might need to do another intervention for them, but they're doing quite well. That intervention is helping them in this respect. And so here, take a look as we kind of broaden it out. We initiated this intervention for everybody. It's definitely having an impact for Kia, which was our outcome. And are we happy with the 70 or so % for the rest of the class? We may be very happy with the class average. What we're trying to do is also help the Kias of the world. All right, so that's the idea of using the progress monitoring for specific interventions. And what we're doing here is our aim line. This is where we want the entire group to be. And as you can see right now, I'm not particularly concerned about that because it's incrementally growing. Over time, I might be concerned. So by the 10th or 11th, if we're still flatlining, we need to make adjustments for the class average to make sure they're continuing to succeed. And of course, Kia, she's starting to move up towards that. So those are elements of the trend lines, as you can see, for both the aim line is for the students overall, and trend line is where the student is. But let's see what she progresses over the next several. This might be something that we're supporting for and what we need, okay? So it looks like it's a potential successful intervention. Especially unsuccessful intervention would look like this. We tried an intervention that would be the black line, and what we find very quickly is, yeah, it's not doing all right. It's doing all right for class average, but for where we want Kia to be, oh my gosh, no, she will not be there in the next 7 to 8 sessions. That's going to be a problem. That is going to be a problem. All right, so I'm getting to a lot of data here. So we do more interventions. We're trying to increase her trend and aim line. And again, this is all elements of progress monitoring. And notice, folks, the growth by 12 and 13, class average has now moved up into the 80s. And what looks like if things continue, they'll go well up into the 90s by the time we do another 5 sessions on this. Kia, though, nope. It's not working for Kia. So Kia, we might need to get additional interventions that are beyond the general education classroom environment. That's part of the tier base that we'll get to. But this is indicating Kia needs more help than we can give. All right, so the progress monitoring data is showing where our students are. It's showing where some of our struggling learners are. It's showing when we provide interventions, what do we do and what does the data say? And it's also identifying, oops, some of our learners might need more help than we can give. All right, so let's get into that. So the primary elements are tier 1, 2, and 3. Now, tier 1 is a general education, high quality core instruction for everybody, kind of similar to what you saw with the class average to the interventions on those previous forms or sheets. Tier 2 would be providing increasing intensive instruction that an individual might need, like a Kia, to provide further enhancements to their trend line to reach that aim line that we're seeking for all individuals. Tier 3 is, well, this is probably more of a Kia, and that is Tier 3 is she is not making it with what we're trying. We've tried a number of different interventions. This might be more individualized. This might be much more intensive. It might require much more hands-on. It might require much more specific supports, and it might require potentially a different place in that we may need to go out into the pod. We may need to go into a resource environment when we're providing this intervention because of the duration, the intensity, and the level of support the individual needs. So in a way, multi-tiered systems of support follows this triangle. Tier 3 is the red, Tier 2 is the yellow, and Tier 1 is the 80%. Okay? So we're trying to support. Now you're saying, wait, Tier 1 overlaps. Well, yes, it does because we're trying to include all individuals. But again, the multi-tiered systems of support is a framework where those individuals in the red are getting what they need, realizing that in the green, those individuals are general education students. In those red, they may be a small percentage that needs that really intensive support for the specific area we're talking about. Now, another way of looking at it would be potentially how we go about Tier 1 would be potentially large group instruction, some individualization. Tier 2 might be more intensive small group, and Tier 3 might be more intensive one-on-one instruction. And as I mentioned before, it's intensity, frequency, and the individualization of the instruction as you go up the ladder to the top of the pyramid. Now, Amber Rowland, a colleague of mine, offered this example with her softball experience, and I thought it was a good one. It's something I could generalize over to some baseball scenarios for one of my boys, but we'll go with hers. And that is that she was actually starting off with her kindergarten or first grade experience to teach her young daughter softball. And Amber's a big softball aficionado, and so she's going to coach those, and they're just going to work about batting, just hitting the ball. So Tier 1 instruction was simply she went over the generals parts. She talked about the bat. She talked about the rules. She talked about playing catch. They played catch. They had a practice. They threw some balls. They tried to have them swing. Everyone received the same instruction. Okay? Everyone received the same instruction, and everyone received the same experiences across the hour and a half, 2-hour practice. Now, game day arrives, and what happens is they come to the plate, and sadly, some of the individuals are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Some of the individuals are having success, some are not having success. So there's a lot of variability, a lot of differences. So as she comes back to practice the next day, she starts to realize, I need to do some more intensive instruction for certain groups. Now I'm going to continue potentially the practice I have. That is, I'm going to continue offering opportunities to talk about the rules. I'm going to continue having them run bases. I'm going to continue having them play catch. I'm going to continue having them pick up grounders and things of that nature. But I'm also going to be, for batting practice, do some more intensive instruction for batting practice, maybe having them hit off the tees, maybe having them go off with parents off to the side. So yes, they get the general batting practice, but they also get a more intensive how to hold the bat, how to look for the eye, et cetera, so that next time they get to the ball game, they're able to have success. All right, so here we go. That's Tier 2. Now, Tier 3 is that we go back to the game, and the game, in terms of our data, we indicate that, well, there seems to be some success with a group of individuals, but there's still some individuals that are really struggling. These are individuals that, my goodness, they're still not uncertain about the bat. They're still uncertain about the ball. They're jumping out of the batter's box when the ball comes. They're swinging at everything, whatever it may be. So Tier 3 might be other strategies that we hadn't thought about, other strategies that are more intense, that take longer to teach, that might require more attention. So we might need an additional assistant coach, or it might be the fact that we need additional parents at practice so that I can coach everybody. But when it comes to this intensive part of batting practice, when we go off to batting, there's a group that goes off and gets really intensive support because we're just trying to make sure that they stay in the batter's box. We're trying to make sure that they swing the balls appropriately. The list goes on. So that, in a brief way, are the three tiers. So again, it's that kind of everyone's getting the instruction. In Tier 2, everyone continues getting the instruction, but we're pulling out giving some intensive instruction for some individuals. And tier 3, it's again a group of individuals that need more intensive. Now we may have a tier 2 and a tier 3 going on, meaning that during batting practice, now we have 3 different groups that we're working with. Everyone gets batting practice tier 1. Our tier 2s are getting more intensive. Our tier 3s are over there in the batting cages getting much more intensive. So back to schools, basically a tier 1, all students, whole school. It's academic and behavioral, as I mentioned, reading, math, writing, social emotional behavior. And it's something we know works. It's based on something we know works. And we might evaluate maybe 6 to 8 weeks to see how we're doing in that. So that's a tier 1, something we're doing in our general education classroom. So as I mentioned before, it is evidence-based, but it is also aligned with what we're trying to do. So back to our aim line, our assessments are linked to our critical content. So they may be periodic assessments, they may be weekly assessments, but they're aligned to what we're trying to do with our instruction so that we can know, okay, we're having success. Oh, we're not. We need to make some different decisions. So the outcomes are, of course, the fact that we're trying to get the majority of individuals, and when we say majority, well up to 80% or more, should be able to succeed based on the interventions we're offering. And that might be a little bit more of a lift for us. We might take on additional strategies or take on some additional time that will help to make certain about 80% or more of our individuals are benefiting from this instruction. Now, tier 2 would be, okay, they're getting to tier 1 interventions, but there's a small subgroup, about 20%, maybe even 15%, they're just not connecting it. They're not connecting on all cylinders. So we need to update an intervention. We're going to use a scientifically or evidence-based or research-based intervention. We're going to make sure it works for this population. We're going to potentially, where we do it, very well could be in the general education classroom. We could do stations instruction both at the elementary but also middle, secondary. I see a lot of revolving instruction both at the middle and secondary in addition to what we see at the elementary level. It might be some reorganization of scheduling or grouping for those individuals. So for example, at the elementary level, it might be we're going to do reading for the next hour, but we're going to have 3 or 4 different classrooms that will do levels of reading at. And so several of the classrooms are more tier 1, but one of our classrooms are more of a tier 2. It's all general ed focused, but our tier 2 focus is more for some of those struggling individuals and more intensive interventions and strategies. And again, our data, we're going to look at school-wide data. We're going to use elements of progress monitoring, as we mentioned earlier. It might be within the system we have. It might be in elements of some things that the curriculum we use supports. And we're going to try to figure out where we're trying to get over the next several weeks, the aim line, and where are some of these individuals trending. And again, it's not daily data collection. It might be, again, periodic. It might be every couple of days, especially if it's aligned to the curriculum and the tools already available to us. And of course, we're trying to accelerate the learning here because remembering Kalia, they're drifting below, so we need to intensify it so that they can pick back up and catch us at that aim line. That's our goal there for tier 2. Now, tier 3 is the fact that, okay, those students in tier 2 are not making it. They need something more intensive. They need something that's potentially longer. They need something that might require them to be in a more quiet environment and more intensive supports. Probably much more explicit and probably smaller groups to be able to do tier 3 as well. So that overview, briefly, is our overview of the 3 tiers, is our overview of MTSS, is our overview of progress monitoring, which is an element of MTSS. And think about that softball game again, about the fact that we're all going to get the same practice, but that batting practice might be more intense for some individuals and levels of intensity, where some individuals are just getting more time and support, where others are definitely going to get something much more explicit, something much more hands-on. So the differences between tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. I hope this was helpful.